The judge told me to sit down, and I told him no. I was 11 years old, standing in the middle of a real courtroom with my dad in handcuffs, and I said, clear as I could, "Your Honor, my dad is innocent, and I will defend him myself. Let me ask you something before we go any further. If it were your father and nobody would listen, would you stay in your seat and keep quiet, or would you stand up too?" Before all that chaos, it was just me and my dad, and our life was small, but it was good. We lived in this little 2-bedroom apartment on the quiet side of the city. Nothing fancy, paint-peeling old couch with a rip-in-the-corner kitchen, with that buzzing fridge that sounded like it might die any minute. But it was home and we felt safe there. My mom died when I was 5, car accident, so it was just me and him after that. And he really tried to make sure I never felt like I didn't have a real family. He woke me up every morning, made breakfast, packed my lunch, brushed my hair, if we were running late, kissed my forehead, and told me, "Be good today, sweetheart," like it was our little promise. At night, he'd sit on my bed and ask, "What did you learn today?" Not like small talk, but like he actually wanted to hear every little detail, and we'd pray together, nothing fancy, just, "Thank you for keeping us safe. Please watch over us tomorrow." That was our rhythm. That was love. We didn't have money, not really. I wore cousins' hand-me-down clothes. We didn't do restaurants or big trips like other families' weekends were library books and feeding ducks at the park with old bread. And sometimes, if it was a special weekend, he'd get a small pizza, and we'd watch a movie on our old TV like it was a party. But I never felt poor until other people told me we were. You know what I mean? Because he made normal feel beautiful. He'd always say, "We don't have much, but we have each other, and that's worth more than money," and I believed him. Then one day he came home different. He came home glowing. He picked me up and spun me in the kitchen. And trust me, my dad is not a spinning kind of guy. And he goes, "Guess what, baby? Somebody noticed my work." He told me a businessman named Richard Stone, older guy, fancy suit, nice watch, big smile, had seen his accounting work and offered to start a company with him as equals. Equal partners, that's what he said, not boss and employee partners. The company would be called Stone and Parker Financial Services, my dad's name right there on the paperwork. And this guy Stone said he'd put in $50,000 to get it started, and my dad would handle the numbers and run the books. I watched my dad kneel in front of me and say with tears in his eyes, "If this works, we could move somewhere better. I could save for your college. I can finally give you what you deserve." And in that moment, I thought, this is it. This is where everything turns around. And it did turn around, just not how we wanted. 2 months later, I get pulled out of class. The principal calls me to the office, and there's this woman in a gray suit waiting for me with a clipboard, and that voice they use when they're about to ruin your whole life, but they want to sound gentle about it. "Rose," she says, "your father has been arrested." I remember just standing there like my feet wouldn't move. Arrested for what? She says he's being charged with theft and fraud. He's accused of stealing $50,000 from his own business account. I said no, he wouldn't do that without even thinking, because I knew it the same way you know the color of your own eyes. Then she tells me I can't go home with him. I have to go stay with my aunt until this is sorted out. Just like that. Do you think that's fair? That someone can make an accusation, and before anybody proves anything, your dad's in handcuffs, and you're basically treated like you don't have a parent anymore? Aunt Rachel took me in. Her house was already full. 3 kids, not a lot of space, not a lot of sleep, a lot of stress. But she tried. I love her for that. But nothing felt right. Kids at school started whispering. I heard one girl say, "That's the girl whose dad stole all that money," like I wasn't even standing there. You ever hear somebody lie about someone you love, and you feel that anger in your throat, like you might actually scream in public if you open your mouth? Yeah, That. They let me see my dad in jail. I sat on one side of the glass, and he sat on the other orange jumpsuit, eyes all red from crying. And I picked up the phone and he said, "Oh, baby girl, I'm so sorry." And that broke me. I said, "Why are they saying you stole money?" And he told me I didn't, Rose. I swear to you, I didn't touch that money. Somebody set me up. He said the money Richard Stone invested, that 50,000, suddenly turned up missing, and the bank had paperwork saying Daniel Parker took it out with a signature that was supposed to be his. My dad looked at me and said, "That's not my signature. Somebody forged it. Somebody is framing me." Then he said the name. He said, "I think it's Stone." And something in me snapped awake. Now you would think, after that, the system helps you, right? Like, okay, we'll sort this out. This is what lawyers are for. This is why we have courts, all that. I used to believe that. Reality is different when you're broke. They gave my dad a public defender named Mr. Roberts, this young, overworked guy with stacks of files everywhere, who honestly looked like he slept in his office. My aunt brought me to see him, and he basically told us, "Look, the evidence looks bad. The prosecutors have bank records and withdrawal forms with your dad's signature on them. The best chance is probably to take a plea and hope for less prison time." Less prison time. Do you hear yourself? You're telling an innocent man to just go to prison politely. If it were you, what would you have done? Would you just sign and say, "Yeah, fine, call me a thief so I can maybe get out a little sooner"? That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid in my aunt's guest room staring at the ceiling, and I remembered something my dad always told me when I was upset. Don't just sit there and cry, use your brain, look for the clues. So I decided that if nobody else was going to fight for him, I would. I was 11, I was scared, I had no plan. But I had one advantage. I knew my dad and I knew he was telling the truth. Aunt Rachel took me back to our old apartment to pack some of our stuff because the landlord was already talking about needing the space if your father doesn't come home, which, by the way, hurts in a different kind of way. While my aunt was in the living room taping boxes, I went straight to my dad's bedroom. My dad is an accountant, which means he keeps everything. Bills, receipts, credit card statements, contracts, all labeled in neat folders like utilities, bank, records, business. I sat at his desk and I started digging. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely flip pages, and I didn't even know what I was looking for. I just knew it was in there somewhere. And then I found it. Folder labeled Stone and Parker, business. Inside that folder was everything. Copies of contracts, bank statements, printed emails, and the so-called withdrawal form where the money supposedly vanished. I looked at the signature, and I knew instantly it wasn't my dad's. My dad signs the D in Daniel sharp and pointy like a little triangle, and the P in Parker is always big and looping like he's proud of it. On this form, the D was round. The P was small and cramped like somebody practiced copying it and almost got it, but not quite. You ever see something and your whole body just goes, "That's it, that's the thing right there." That was me, but then I saw something bigger. The bank statement said the $50,000 was withdrawn on March 15th at 2:30 p.m. Now I'm a kid, but I write everything in my school planner because I'm that kid, and I pulled it out of my backpack and flipped to March 15th. And right there, I had written parent-teacher conference with Dad. p.m. I remembered that day perfectly. My teacher, Mrs. Adams, was telling my dad I should be moved to advanced math. And then afterward, my dad took me to the little coffee shop next to the school and bought me hot chocolate and told me smart girls get rewarded. And we were literally sitting there at 2:45 laughing about homework. So how is he across town stealing $50,000 at 2:30 if he's sitting in a tiny plastic chair in my classroom at 2:30? Do I live with a superhero who can clone himself now? It gets better. My dad keeps his credit card statements. I dug through another folder called Bank Records, and there it was. A charge at corner coffee shop, 2:47 p.m. March 15th, the same day, right next to my school. The bank that lost the money is across town. You physically cannot be in both places in that time frame. That's not a feeling, that's math. Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind. So I took all of it. The fake signature, the timeline, the credit card record. But there was one more thing in that folder, and this is the part that made my stomach flip. It was a printed email from Richard Stone to my dad dated 3 weeks before the money disappeared. It said, "This partnership isn't working out the way I hoped. I'm going to need my initial investment back soon. Let's discuss how to close the business." Read that again. He straight up said he wanted his $50,000 back. So now ask yourself, what's easier, doing it the official way and closing the business legally, or yanking the money yourself, faking my dad's name and calling the cops? So now not only do you get your money, you also get to point and say, "Criminal, not me." You see it, right? I brought that whole folder to Mr. Roberts. I dropped it on his messy desk like I was dropping a bomb, and I said, "My dad didn't do it. Here's why." At first he gave me that tired lawyer face like, "Kid, I know you're trying," and then I started walking him through it. The signature that doesn't match the timestamp from the bank, the school conference, the coffee shop receipt at 2:47. The email where Stone basically admits he wants the money back. And I watched this man's whole body change. He leaned forward. He stopped typing. He said, "Wait, you're telling me your dad was with you in a parent-teacher meeting at the exact time the money was pulled?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Can your teacher confirm that?" And I said, "Yes." And then I reminded him, we also had the credit card record. I am 11 years old, explaining chain of custody and physical location evidence to a licensed attorney, and he finally goes quiet and says, "This actually matters." For the first time, someone besides me believed my dad. But here's the punch in the stomach. A week before trial, Mr. Roberts called my aunt and said the school district refused to let my teacher testify because the school doesn't want to be involved in a criminal case. The coffee shop had already deleted their camera footage because they only keep it 30 days, and the prosecutors said the email from Stone doesn't prove anything except that he wanted his money back. So even with everything I found, they still told my dad to think about pleading guilty. Guilty just to make it go away. Guilty just so the system could close the file and move on. I lay awake that night, and I made a decision. And it wasn't cute, it wasn't brave, it was just necessary. If I didn't speak, they were going to take my father. The day of the trial, I put on the nicest clothes. I had a white shirt and a blue skirt my teacher gave me because she said I should look respectful, like respect is something you have to wear. They brought my dad in wearing handcuffs and an orange jumpsuit, and when he saw me in the third row, he mouthed, "I love you." And I thought, if I lose him today, that's the last time I hear that. The prosecutor looked calm, like this was already done. Richard Stone was there, expensive suit, clean watch, looking like the victim. Reporters in the back row waiting to write their little story about local accountant charged with fraud. The judge came in. Judge Harrison, older guy, sharp eyes, one of those voices that fills a room. And they started with, "This is the case of the state versus Daniel Parker," and I just stood up. My legs were shaking so bad I could barely walk, but I stepped into the aisle clutching my folder and I said, "Your Honor, my name is Rose Parker. That man is my father, and I will defend him, myself, because no one else will tell the truth." The whole room exploded. Reporters stood up, people started whispering. The prosecutor jumped to his feet, like his chair was on fire, and he said, "Your Honor, this is ridiculous. The child needs to sit down trying to laugh me off like I was doing show and tell." And here's the twist that nobody saw coming. The judge didn't throw me out. He stared at me for a long moment, and then he said in this slow voice, like even he couldn't believe what was happening, "I have been a judge for 32 years, and I have never done this before, but I'm going to let you speak." Yeah. He swore me in front of everybody. They put me in the witness stand, this big high wooden chair, where my feet didn't even reach the floor. I raised my right hand and promised to tell the truth, and I started laying it all out like I had practiced in the mirror. I showed them the forged signature, and I explained in plain English how my dad really signs his name, because I've watched him sign permission slips, birthday cards, report cards, you name it. The prosecutor tried to interrupt and said, "Your Honor, she's not a handwriting expert." And the judge said, "The court will consider her testimony," which is judge language for "shut up, I'm listening." I showed them the bank statement with the exact time the money supposedly got pulled. 2:30 p.m. on March 15th. And then I showed them the credit card statement. The coffee shop next to my school, and I said, "My dad was sitting across from me at that time buying me hot chocolate, because we had just finished talking to my teacher." The whole courtroom went quiet like someone turned the volume down. Then I pulled out this printed email from Richard Stone. I read the part where he said, "I'm going to need my initial investment back soon," and I said, "Your Honor, what if he just took his own money back and then blamed my dad, so my dad looks like the thief and he walks away clean?" People in the courtroom actually gasped. The judge leaned forward. He looked over his glasses at the prosecutor and said, "Were you aware of this email?" And the prosecutor's face went tight. That's when I knew I had hit something real. The prosecutor tried to break me. He walked up all smooth and said, "Miss Parker, you love your father very much, don't you?" And I said yes. He said, "And you would do anything to protect him, wouldn't you?" And I said yes. Then he smiled and said, "So is it possible that you're just seeing what you want to see, like I made up timestamps and banking records out of thin air?" And I looked right at him and said, "Sir, I'm not imagining anything. The documents are real. The credit card charge is real. The email is real. And I was with my dad when you say he was at the bank. Those are facts." Some people in the courtroom actually laughed under their breath because they saw it the way he was trying to twist it. Then came the moment. The judge called Richard Stone to the stand. Stone sat down like he owned the place, clean suit, shiny watch, calm voice. He said he trusted my dad, that my dad betrayed him, that he invested in a dream and got robbed. He sounded real sad, real hurt, almost convincing. And then Mr. Roberts, my dad's lawyer, who by this point had his confidence back, walked up holding my folder, my work, and said, "Mr. Stone, please read this line from your email dated February 20th, and made him read the part about, 'I'm going to need my initial investment back soon.'" Stone's face changed. You could see the crack. Then Mr. Roberts said, "Where were you at 2:30 p.m. on March 15th when the $50,000 was withdrawn?" And Stone said, "I don't remember." So Mr. Roberts said, "You don't remember where you were at the exact moment $50,000 of your money supposedly vanished, and the whole courtroom just watched him." He started to sweat, and then the judge stepped in. The judge leaned forward and said, slow and cold, "Mr. Stone, I want you to think very carefully before you answer my next question. Did you forge Daniel Parker's signature on that withdrawal form?" And the room went absolutely silent. You could hear people breathing. Stone went red, then pale, then his shoulders just dropped, like all the air left his body, and he whispered, "Yes." He said, "Yes." He said, "Yes, I took the money. Yes, I forged his signature. Yes, I set him up." Just like that, the whole case flipped in one heartbeat. That was the moment the courtroom turned from "Daniel Parker is a thief" to "Oh my God, This man is innocent, and we almost locked him up forever. The judge ordered Richard Stone arrested on the spot for fraud, theft, perjury, all of it. He told the prosecutors right there in that room, "You will dismiss all charges against Daniel Parker immediately." And they said yes. Because at that point, what else could they even say? A guard walked over and took off my dad's handcuffs, and my dad stood up like he didn't trust his own legs, and I just ran to him, and he dropped to his knees and wrapped me up, and he was crying into my shoulder saying, "You saved me, baby girl, you saved me," and I kept telling him, "I love you, I love you." And people in the courtroom were clapping, and some of them were crying too, and even the judge had to take his glasses off and wipe his eyes. We walked out of that courthouse, and reporters swarmed us like we were celebrities, microphones in our faces, cameras flashing, people shouting questions like, "Daniel, how does it feel to be free?" And "Rose, how did you prove your father was innocent?" And my dad looked straight at those cameras and said, "For 7 months, I was treated like a criminal for something I didn't do. I begged people to believe me and nobody did." But this little girl never stopped believing. When everybody else told me to give up and take a plea, she fought for me. And I'll be honest with you, I felt proud. But I also felt something else, something heavier, like anger under the relief. Because yeah, justice was done technically. My dad got his job back with an apology, and even a raise because his boss said, "We should have known you'd never do something like that. You're the most honest man I know." Which sounds sweet until you remember that same boss watched him get walked out in handcuffs and didn't say a word at the time. The story hit the news, and kids at my school suddenly wanted to sit with me at lunch and called me the little lawyer, like that was cute, like this was a movie and not the worst 7 months of our lives. Even the judge showed up at our apartment later in regular clothes, like someone's grandpa, and brought me a book called Great Trials in American History, and told me, "You have more justice in you than most lawyers I've seen in 32 years. Don't ever lose that fire." And yeah, Richard Stone pleaded guilty and went to prison and agreed to pay restitution, pay back what he cost us, pay back the damage. But I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to answer in the comments, because this is where it stops being just our story and starts being about everybody. Why did it take an 11-year-old girl standing up in open court and breaking every rule just to get someone in power to actually look at the evidence? Why did nobody check the timestamp on a bank withdrawal until a kid said, "Look at this"? Why was the first advice we were given, "Hack a plea, hope for less prison time," instead of, "Let's prove you're innocent"? Do you honestly think that's fair? So here's what I want to know from you. If somebody you love, your dad, your mom, your sister, your kid, got dragged away for something they didn't do, and the system started moving like a machine to crush them, would you sit quietly and pray it works out? Or would you fight like I did, even if people told you to sit down and be quiet? And one more thing, and be real with me. Should a child have to do what I did, or is that proof that something is broken way bigger than just one fake signature and one bad businessman? Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you think what happened to us was justice or just luck. Tell me if you've ever seen something like this in your town, because I read the comments, and trust me, your voice matters. If you're still here, share this with somebody who needs to hear it, and drop your story below, because sometimes the smallest voice is the one that finally makes people listen.